the very rare in history happens. And the people that it happens to don't believe it will happen to them. And the people who are conquering them are not Genghis Khan or Tamerlane or Attila the Hun that come in, sweep through a civilization, murder people, and move on. They are intellectuals. They're very capable people. They're very well-read. They're very articulate. Alexander the Great, student of Aristotle, companion of the philosopher Callisthenes, when he said to the Thebans, I will be down there in 300 miles, I will be down there in 10 days. And if you don't, and I wipe your city out, they didn't think that was imaginable. The city was 1,100 years old. Or when Scipio came, they said, we fought the Romans twice, and we always had an agreement after we lost. And we remember Scipio Africanus, your adopted grandfather. And he was he gave us terms, and we're the city of Hannibal. And they didn't understand Scipio Aemilianus was a killer, and he was going to destroy everything that was Carthage, down to the foundations of the city. And when Constantine XI was dealing with Mehmet, he sent him a letter, and he said, you're only 21 years old, and we've been here for 1,100 years, and we're very valuable to Islam. We're the window on the West. You can buy cannon, you can get expertise with your concessions inside the walls of Constantinople. And Mehmet basically said, you've only got about 50 or 60,000 people. You're not the Byzantine Empire of the past. And I don't want to hear anything you have to say. And the same thing, I could go to the same argument. What I'm getting at is they had no imagination how weak they were and what the actual intent of their enemies are. And when you look at the real world and you ask yourself, if President Xi really wanted to take Taiwan, would he be willing to destroy it, to take it, to get rid of it? Everybody says, well, he wouldn't do that because of the chip industry, or he would lose too much. But could he be stopped without a nuclear exchange? I don't think he could, myself, given the military right now. I think he could be in 5 years if we rearmed. I think everybody thinks the Ukraine thing is static, but to win that war, the only way Ukraine could get Russia off its back is to follow traditional military logic, and that would probably be to hit Russian supply depots, oil refineries along the border to interrupt their invasion. But to do that would, I think, invite a response from Putin that would be very unpredictable. And I don't think he would care at all if he could level Kiev and get away with it. So, and I don't need to talk about Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, but if you came from another planet and you looked at what Turkey has said and done, it's supplying Russia with weapons. It can't be trusted with NATO arms. During the coup 6 years ago in Turkey, Mr. Erdogan let it be known that our Cold War huge dirty bombs, I think we have 50 nuclear weapons at Isilar. He said he didn't think that they were properly the property of the United States. They'd been there so long to protect Turkey that he felt that they were Turkish, and he didn't want them removed. And I know there are people in the U.S. military that feel they have to remove them, whether stealthily or one by one, because they don't feel they're in a safe place. That tomorrow, if there was a conflagration between Greece and Turkey, or Armenia and Turkey, or the Kurds and Turkey, that base could be surrounded and the weapons could be appropriated. And all of this is dependent on a West that can't deter people. And we think we've been here so long and we've run the show so long that that's just unthinkable. All the inventions, all the technology, all the universities, they're all Western, and therefore the world needs us. I don't think that's necessarily true. And so I wouldn't worry if today the English-speaking countries were armed to the teeth. They were spending 3 to 4% GDP. They had sophisticated anti-missile protection over there, like the Iron Dome. They had both nuclear and tactical capabilities. They had Churchillian-like leaders, and then they were on. But and they weren't suffering from this fertility crisis, and debt crisis. But I don't see that on the world today, so I'm very, very worried that something terrible could happen. I don't think it's likely, but I think it could happen.
Actually, in the book, you describe some pretty horrific torture and death in your book, mainly by quoting historic eyewitnesses. The Carthaginians torturing and killing torturing and killing Romans, human sacrifice by both those people and most notoriously the Aztecs. Since you wrote this book, as you just said, of course, we've seen brutality that must match even those horrendous examples in your book, with the slaughtering of and raping and just sheer unbelievable cruelty by Hamas in their successful attempt, I suppose you'd say, to provoke what's now happened. It's a powerful reminder to very, very, very soft generations in the West who have lived in the peace and security secured by our own forebears, that human nature hasn't changed. And you wonder whether we haven't inculcated in ourselves such a naivety, such a sort of an innocence, such a hopeless failure to recognize just how cruel we actually can be when we're debased. And that ought to be a massive warning in itself. People ought to be genuinely afraid of what might happen to themselves, to their children, to their loved ones, if we're not prepared to say freedom matters, law and order matters. We've got to stand up so that we can secure the things we have, but we seem so blinded.
The veneer of civilization, as Thucydides said, is always very thin because human nature is unchanging. So when I wrote collated from the historian Appian and parts of Livy, that gruesome scene on the walls were to get the attention of the Romans. They cut off the ears and disemboweled, cut up and mutilated these Roman soldiers and then threw them from the walls. I was kind of shocked. There's a lot of barbarity in the ancient world, but that was one of the most graphic scenes. I'd known of the scene for some years, but when I read and I looked at some of the videos from Hamas, two things struck me. One, I had never seen in the modern world that level of mutilation or gang rape or sickness, putting a child in a microwave, for example. And I'd never seen such indifference to it. So here we are 8 months later, and the people on the campus don't even mention it. And not only do they not mention it, they were cheering it on after it happened. As I said, a number of professors have been put on leave, professors, not students, for saying things like they were exhilarated. And this was the beginning of the Free Palestine movement. And so we're always just a hair's breadth from what we really are, which is pretty savage without civilization. That's why it's very important when we watch these campus things that you put a high premium on having a clean campus. You have a high premium that nobody breaks in and destroys books or overturns chairs or defecates in a classroom floor. If you don't do that, each insidious assault on civilization takes away that veneer. And it can happen very quickly. And that's why I think what was so shocking about the demonstrations were not just the ideology, but the manner in which they treated people. They went right back to they were like the black shirts of the 1930s in Germany, where they just started roughing people up and nobody said a word. Or they were like the anarchist of where they just destroyed things. And one of the most disturbing pictures that I saw was the UCLA campus when they were forced out. It was unimaginable, the flotsam and jetsam that was left. It was almost disgraceful. And then you had these Mexican-American dutiful maintenance people that had to deal with human excrement and needles. It was just horrific. And these were our future leaders, the elite. No one had even said anything about it. No college president said, you've done millions of dollars of damage to our infrastructure and you're going to pay for it. So the veneer of civilization can be erased very quickly. And then what's beneath it is pretty scary. And so, when Iran was talking about sending its 320 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones, they were talking, that was the largest barrage in missile attack since World War II from V2 rockets. We've never seen that many. And people forget that the intent was not measured. Anthony Blinken said, if you want to attack, you have to do it within limits. They didn't do it within limits. The idea was to swarm the defenses with drones and cruise missiles and then have the 120 ballistic missiles do some real damage. And nobody said anything after. They just shrugged. I think we don't even realize now that has opened a new chapter. We know now that the Israeli homeland and the Iranian homeland are not sacrosanct. That it's okay to attack it or vice versa, given Iran's attack on the homeland of Israel. And I expect in the years to follow, months to follow, week to follow, that there's going to be some very scary things go on. I don't think there'll be a second Holocaust. I just don't think there will be a second Holocaust. I think if Israel decides that Iran has the bomb, and then they will conclude that they will use it, and they have good reason to believe that, and they will not allow that to be used. And that's going to be something that no one can imagine what would happen in a nuclear exchange. And yet we don't seem to. I mean, we're talking about a situation as we speak that the major maritime corridors of commerce and communications and trade are shutting down. The Red Sea is inoperable now thanks to the Houthis. The Black Sea is a war zone. The Straits of Hormuz, Iran is hijacking ships. The eastern coast of the Mediterranean is iffy, and they've talked about attacking the Suez Canal. And so this is very insidious, and I don't think that we're kind of decivilizing both at home and abroad. We don't quite see it. This new axis of Russia, Iran, China, North Korea. If countries like Qatar or Turkey or India think it's on the ascendance, then they may want to passively or covertly aid it. And if they think we're in the descendants, their attitude is, well, I don't want to be bullied by Russia or China and have, a ambivalent America that can't protect me, or I don't know whether I'm under its nuclear shield or not. So I have to make the necessary adjustment. And then the world gets very scary. And so I think I wrote the book with that in mind, but I didn't have any idea that it would crystallize as it did on October 7th.